Hi guys, welcome back to the next episode of the TRA Performance Education Podcast with me, your tiny titan host, Vicky Masita. And I am always alone as a host, which I absolutely love because it gives me a break from Lee and Paul. Not that I don't love them as much, but it gives me a break from listening to them anyway. However, in the hot seat today, I have got a really interesting guest. Very, very happy to speak to him as well. And it's Dr. Brennan Roberts. Brennan, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I am excellent. I've had some coffee. I'm good to go.
Fantastic. We always like morning caffeine, don't we?
Yeah, it helps a lot.
That's it. So, Brandon, just for people who don't know who you are out there in the strength world, will you just give us a little bit of a background and who you are, where you've come from?
Yeah, for sure. So I am a bit of a hybrid scientist, coach, and athlete. So I'm a scientist and I study muscle hypertrophy specifically and muscle strength, kind of how to maximize those. As an athlete, I'm mostly a bodybuilder. I've had my foray into powerlifting, but I'm not very good at it. So I just stick with the physique sports. And then as a coach, I coach powerlifters and bodybuilders, and my roster is right about split. So I have maybe 4 or 5 powerlifters and 4 or 5 different types of physique athletes. And then when I have time, I also write for scifit.net, which is kind of an evidence-based website. So we do a lot of cool stuff there. So
amazing. Okay. So what about your history as a bodybuilder? So I take it that you were a competitive bodybuilder. How did you get on and you compete in seasons?
Yeah, so I haven't competed too long, probably about 5 years. And the first season was awful. I did it myself and, I had no idea what I was doing. I was kind of maybe lower 20s, kind of in college, did my own prep, did my own off season. It's a great learning experience, but I don't know if I could do it again. And then 2 years ago I got on with Jeff Alberts kind of to help me out a little bit, kind of learn the ropes, and that went really well. We did a couple shows. I am also currently in prep. So I'm super excited about this season because now that I've got a couple seasons under my belt, it just makes for a better experience. So I think I'm probably 4 or 5 months out now, I think. So
fantastic. Okay. I think it's the same the world over, isn't it? Everybody's very first prep is always like the worst one. And especially coming up to like these years now where people have had a good 4 or 5 competing seasons under their belt, because 4 or 5 or 6 years ago, all of the knowledge was just bro science and we didn't actually know how to do things properly. So it's nice to hear that even some of the great people in the scientific industry, learning all the literature, has still made that same mistake back 5 years ago. So we're not alone out there, people. Even people like Brandon have made the mistakes as well.
Oh yeah, it's part of it. It's all learning. So
Exactly. So delving into today's subject then, Brandon, we're actually going to be having a look at natural contest prep and what kind of methods that you use in order to retain strength, and just have a look at some of the differences that you've got to do for a natural bodybuilding prep compared to a natural powerlifting prep. So I'm going to hand it over to you, really. How far out, should we say, would you like to start a natural prep for both sides of the coin, really?
Okay, so we'll start with physique athletes because I think that takes a lot more time. If you want to account for all of the life events that come up and kind of bumps along the road, I encourage people to start preps about at least 15 weeks before they want to compete. We've actually seen a trend in kind of the bodybuilding world, I think, to actually have longer preps, but it really just allows more time and it's easier. For a powerlifting prep, I like 10 weeks. 10 weeks works really, really well. I've usually have my athletes start 10 weeks out. That way we can get, down weight if we need to. We can start working more on the competition lifts. If I've got some accessory work in there, I start to pull it out. So I think that's the biggest difference is, probably twice as long for a physique athlete. And then kind of in terms of exercises, right? So the bodybuilders, you got to get your volume in.
Sure.
And doing, strength work is really good to indicate how you're responding. Obviously, if you're losing a lot of strength, that's not good. That probably means, you're losing some lean mass at least. However, in powerlifting, we don't want to lose anything. We actually want to get stronger, right?
Yeah.
So, bodybuilding, I have this, the squat, the bench, and the deadlift in most of my programs for my athletes, just because they like them. They've been doing them forever. But I'm not afraid to kind of pull those out and say, hey, we're going to hit a leg press twice a week because you can get more volume, right? It's a little bit easier, safer than a squat. As physique athletes start to lean out, there's this thing that happens, and I have not really been able to scientifically explain it other than your leverages or your levers change. So you lose, fat from your glutes, your quads, your hamstrings, and everything kind of just starts to shift a little bit. And physique athletes, they're not really used to that. So it does happen over a long period of time, but it's still really hard to deal with. I know my first prep, I was like, what is going on? Why can I not squat? I lost like probably 20% of my squat strength. And I'm like, I don't understand. So after, 5 or 6 years, kind of like, okay, I totally get it now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think with bodybuilding, it's more of like, yeah, we want to keep strength, or physique athletes, we want to keep strength. We can switch stuff around. Mainly the volume is what we want to hit, keep the intensity up. I also have not a problem with, but it's always a struggle to keep intensity up when you're dieting for so long.
For sure.
Yeah. So I usually, if I'm going to do some strength work, I'll put it after my athletes' refeeds, right? So they'll have a nice refeed, going to the gym, they're a little bit more filled out. They do a little bit better in their strength movements. Now, switching over to powerlifting, it's a lot different. But basically, I will go from maybe we're squatting or benching or deadlifting twice a week, which is pretty normal for most people, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe not deadlifting, but definitely squatting and benching. And so we'll go, all right, well, let's pull out all of our accessory work. Let's squat 3 times a week if you can recover from it, right? And then let's bench 3 times a week as long as, again, you can recover from it. Deadlift, I struggle to get people over twice a week just because it's so hard to recover from.
Sure.
Yeah. So I think those are the kind of main differences. I will say I've seen a lot of different athletes, and some of the biggest difference is some people can go, 4 weeks without a deload, even in a kind of prep phase. And some people can go like 6 weeks. And so I was talking to an athlete last night, and he was like, oh, I feel great. We're on week 7. And I'm like, well, you feel like great now, but next week you might start feeling it. So we're just gonna be a little cautious and go ahead, take a deload, and then we'll ramp up for the last 4 weeks or whatever.
Right. Okay. That's cool. And would you say that the same kind of programming techniques you use are the same across the gender boards? So benching, squatting, and deadlifting, the same kind of way that you would do for females as well as males, or would you kind of switch it around?
So for physique athletes, the females have a lot more glute work. I think that's pretty normal. But again, that's kind of what they're judged on, right? In the males, it's funny because males really don't like glute work at all.
No, I know. They hate it.
Yeah. So it's like, program hip thrusts, and they'll be like, I just skipped that. I'm like, okay, well, if you're just going to skip it, there's no reason for me to program it.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I think for physique, that's the biggest difference. I think that females can usually handle a little more volume. And I was actually listening to one of your other podcasts last night. And, it seems that in the fitness industry, females are just a little bit, I don't know, not stubborn, but better at suffering, maybe.
Yeah, well, that is true. Yeah.
So, in females, it's a little more glute based. Maybe they have some lagging areas like some females don't work their backs very well, so they'll come in and I'll have, even if I haven't burn off season, it's like, all right, well, if we're going to lose muscle, or if we're going to kind of look or work into something in a physique prep, we're going to focus on a couple different things, but I try not to tilt it too much away from kind of a standard, hit everything twice a week, vary the volume depending on how you can recover, and make sure we're not burning out. Now for powerlifting, it's not too much different, but females don't like to bench as much generally as males.
Yeah.
So it's kind of working around that, but they definitely can. So I think it's less different for powerlifting than it is physique athletes for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting, isn't it? Because you've always got the outliers as well. And that is something that we really do need to take into consideration. I find a lot with my athletes as well. And even bringing it back to, if I look at myself, because I'm a hybrid athlete, like we were talking about previously, I really love working my glutes in a bodybuilding phase. But I really love benching as well, because compared to a lot of girls, especially my weight as well, my bench is strong. And I always give myself a hard time because I train with some really big, strong people, and they're benching 100 kilos or 112 kilos. And I'm there with my 62.5. But they're like, crap, Vic, you weigh 50 kilos. So, but it's 62.5. So it's a nice bench. So we always do have those outliers as well. So let's go into a little bit more of a deeper way in prep then. Do you believe in the whole peak week type of thing?
It really depends on the person and how many competitions they've done. So I really like to have physique athletes do more than one show, especially if it's their first season, just because the first time you're on stage, you're a nervous wreck. You forget things. It's very fun, but it's very nerve wracking. So the first show, I probably don't peak week, your typical kind of carb loading and things like that, for anyone. Now, when we look at a more seasoned competitor, for females, if they're in bikini or really even kind of figure, I won't carb load them or do anything super special. Females tend to be a little trickier because, kind of depending on where they are in their cycle, they can hold some water. So I don't like to chance it too much. But for guys, if they're seasoned, if you had a good peak week, you could probably add, I don't know, maybe 5%. And if they're really competitive, that makes a difference. But if they're, at a local or regional show, that's probably not going to be the difference between them winning and losing. So again, it depends. But for the people I do peak, usually I actually front load. So they're depleted already, right? You grind it out for a week or two before your peak week, because during peak week you're going to have, say you're eating 100 carbs a day, and then you're going to bump it up to 300 just to get full and stay full.
Yeah.
So I'll run 3 days of 300 carbs and just have them send me photos every morning. Just say, all right, just let me see what you're looking like. And it's a little bit taxing for the person, but when they look at the photos, because I'll send them back side by sides, and they're like, wow.
It's crazy as well, isn't it? How much you change, almost hour to hour as well. the more you fill up. So I had exactly the same thing with one of my clients, and I got her to take pictures every kind of every breakfast, every lunch, every tea, and then before she went to bed. And the difference that was all the way through the day, I did 4 side by sides, and she even said that is insane.
Yeah. It really, it's amazing how the body kind of adapts. So it's real fun. That's probably my favorite time, is kind of seeing athletes come into themselves as they grow into their first couple competitions or their first season, and it's you got the bug. You'll be back.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you found sometimes that that people fill up really, really well, but then they lose it all overnight?
Yeah. So again, I don't think we have, there's a scientific reason, but, if we fill up and then we deplete overnight, we're kind of feeding all these carbs in, and the system is like, oh, I got all this food. Let me put it everywhere else I need to go. And then glycogen, I mean, we can last on low glycogen stores for a really long time. We'll just be fatigued.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely. Overnight, they wake up. So personally, my first competition a couple years ago, I didn't wake up kind of early enough. And so as you mentioned, over time you kind of fill out if you're eating over the day. And so I was like a whole meal behind, and you could totally see it on stage. And like by the time the night show hit, I was looking perfect. And I was like, man, that's cool, but I kind of already lost.
Yeah.
So,
You wanted that look for the quarter turn comparisons, didn't you?
yeah. So, it is fun. So
That's it. So what about then for powerlifters? Because obviously the carbohydrate aspect of things where we're going to deplete and then put them up, you're not going to use that same strategy for powerlifters because it doesn't really matter what they look like on the day. It matters about what they weigh in like.
yeah.
So what about a peak week strategy for your powerlifters then?
Okay. So I've most of my powerlifters fall into two camps. The first camp, you can do whatever you want, basically, and their strength will stick around, and you can drop, 5 kilos and they'll be perfectly fine, like on meet day. And then the other camp is they lose weight and they just tank.
Yeah.
So I figured that out first, and I always warn them. I'm like, if you've not really competed much and you've never cut water, or like kind of loaded water, this might suck, but we kind of have to figure it out for the long-term goals of, if you want to be at nationals or you want to go to a big meet. So I usually I try not to let them get too far over their weight for competition. So again, 4-5 kilos max, I think. And you could lose 7 kilos in a week, but it's just, it's risky.
It's quite scary as well when you say it like that, isn't it? I can lose 7 kilos in a week. That's mad.
Yeah. And I have not had an athlete do that, but I have had someone push probably 5.5. And he's like, we kind of use the sauna. We use like everything just because he was all about it. He's like, I want to see how much weight I can drop. And I was like, okay, that's fine. We can try that. I was like, if you want to go for it, there's techniques we can use. But for the most part,
how did he feel by doing that? How did he feel losing 5.5 kilos in a week?
He said he felt fine. There are soldiers kind of in our industry where they can do whatever and they'll just tough it out. So I put him definitely in that. He will, do very well in even his off season, just really pushing and kind of growing and stuff. And so when you have an athlete like that, as long as you're safe, let them go. It's their kind of, it's what they want to do. So
sure. Yeah.
But in terms of a kind of more standard prep, the last 2 weeks usually is when I start dieting people, and I try not to diet them too hard. But I would push them a little bit further than I push my physique athletes. So in the last 2 weeks of a kind of physique athlete, I might aim for, about 0.5 kilo loss of body weight. And my powerlifters, I'm trying to push them up to 1 kilo, maybe 1.5 kilos, just so we come in and we're not like scrambling to lose weight. So we'll throw in some cardio, just slow, steady state kind of stuff. Their training volume is usually low by then anyway. You're tapering the last probably 10 days for some people, maybe 7 for others. So I'll start to creep the cardio in and maybe do 3 sessions of cycling, 30-40 minutes. I was like, throw on Netflix, go ahead, just relax and do a little cardio. Start pulling the carbs a little bit, maybe some fat. And then the last probably 4 or 5 days is where I really kind of push, if I'm going to push them. And most of that is, a little cardio. I don't want them fatigued, but again, their training volume right before a meet is really low.
Yeah.
And then I'll pull carbs, probably half of what they normally have. So if they're eating 300, I'll put them at 150. That's pretty good benchmark, I'd say. And then we'll start kind of water loading, and I'll work them up to maybe 1.5 gallons if they can handle it, over the week before competition. And so you can usually, we call it flushing out kind of the system, but I mean, it's just the body adapting normally. So, and then if they have a weigh-in the day before, it's awesome because it's way easier. If they have the weigh-in the day of, it gets a little bit trickier because, you're going to weigh in and then maybe 2 hours later, you're going to have to go on the platform. And so you can't eat as much, obviously. So,
sure.
If they have a same day weigh-in, I'll again try not to let them get too far over. Like, we'll be ready maybe 2 or 3 days before, so we don't have to do any last minute, carb pulls or cardio or anything weird. If they have a day before, I feel a little bit safer, and I'll just, deplete them as much as I can. And then over 24 hours, you can pretty much get your glycogen back to full. So, if you have 400 grams of glycogen and it each holds maybe 3 to 4 grams of water, that's almost 2 to 3 kilos right there. So yeah, that's kind of the gist of it. I guess if that was clear enough, you can let me know if it was.
Yeah, no, that was really understandable. Actually, it was quite eloquently put. So again, I'm going to put the same question to you. Is that the same strategy that you use for your female powerlifters as you would do for your male powerlifters?
Right. So female powerlifters, they tend to not. So I haven't had any experiences where they're like 3 or 4 kilos over their weight. They really like to stay at their weight for the most part.
For sure.
So I actually don't do that much different. The glycogen kind of depletion, if I'm going to water load them, it works it doesn't work as well because they just don't have as much muscle mass. They don't have as much glycogen. So I have to kind of be cautious of that. And I probably want them at their weigh-in, 3 or 4 days before. So I'm feeling good. They're not going to freak out. So yeah, it's a lot more cautious than the males. So the males, I'm a little bit more risky.
Interesting. And one of the big questions that I'm going to ask in terms of your female athletes, because it's very interesting as well. So bodybuilding prep wise, female athletes can, of course, obviously they have their menstrual cycle and things. And in a bodybuilding prep, I suppose it doesn't really matter that much unless they have some abdominal swelling. Mm-hmm. However, for a powerlifter, it can really matter because I don't know about previously. I don't have a menstrual cycle. I'm completely amenorrheic. However, a lot of women, or when I used to have a decent cycle, I used to gain about 0.5 stone. So that was like 7 pounds on the scales in the week leading up to my menstrual week. So what would you do in that kind of scenario?
Ooh, so I've been lucky. I haven't really had that happen, but just to kind of theoretically walk us through it, I'd probably push as much water as you can handle. Just so if there's a water retention problem, we're just kind of feeding into it and saying, all right, you're safe, you're hormonally, I can't do anything about that. Hopefully I've seen these fluctuations. If you're in a 10-week prep, you've probably seen that flux already. And so I can say, oh, well, the past 2 months, you've kind of gained some weight around your cycle. We need to be ready for that. So in that case, I'd probably have them. I mean, you could throw more cardio at them. You could kind of pull more food. I don't think, for some reason, just kind of anecdotally in my experience, I don't think the food affects females as much in powerlifting as maybe in physique sports or even against males in powerlifting. Not really sure why that is, but so I would really hope that didn't happen. But if it did, I would kind of try to see if we could get some water and kind of glycogen depletion and pull out all the tricks, maybe even try, some sodium manipulation. It kind of just, you hope it doesn't happen. So.
That's it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Women are bloody weird things, and we always kind of mess stuff up. It'd be interesting it'd be so much easier if we just had the same hormones as men and just leave it like that. But unfortunately, we don't. We've pulled the short straw, haven't we? Okay, well, perfect. Yeah. So realistically then, Brennan, we are coming up on time here now for the end of the podcast. But let's end it by asking you a question of saying, if there was one bit of advice that you could give any physique or powerlifter coming into their very first prep, what would it be?
Okay, so I will pretend like I'm talking to myself.
Okay.
For physique, I'll do one for each. For physique athletes, practice posing, because I'm also a judge, and I judge occasionally, but you can tell that people have not practiced their posing. And if that means getting a coach, or if that means just filming yourself and watching it, having even like that beginner to like lower intermediate level of just posing confidence even makes a huge difference on stage. Judges see that and they're like, oh, that person's, I know it's their first or second show, but like they're trying really hard, they're doing really well. And then the person next to them also first, second show, and they didn't put any practice into posing, and it's like, you can kind of tell. So for physique athletes, practice your posing, feel confident, kind of own it, right? For powerlifting, I would say, if you don't have a coach, honestly, don't even try any weight cuts or anything. Just first couple meets, go in. If you're over your weight class, that's okay. You're just focus on yourself, your own numbers, getting better. And then when you make it to the next level, right, you can start doing the weight cuts and things where it'll matter. So yeah, the two kind of just simple things that are really hard to hear, really hard to make yourself do, but are really, really important.
Perfect. I really love that. And finally then, Brennan, where can people find you to contact you if they need be?
Okay, so you can find me on strengthguys.com is the kind of coaching side. That's Brandon at thestrengthguys.com. I'm also pretty active on Facebook. I try to be, get into the social media sphere, kind of share things. And then if you're interested in the kind of writing style, it's scifit.net. So those are the two, main places. But Strength Guys has a really good team, and I love working with a team. That's probably one of my favorite things, working with them.
Perfect. And I'll make sure that I get those links off you before we go, and I will put everything in the YouTube comments for you guys to click on if needs be. So that is it for another week on the TRA Education and Performance Podcast. And so guys, if you have any questions for Brandon, any question for myself, or any questions for Paul or Lee, then please put them down and I'll make sure that we get back to them as soon as possible. But other than that, that's it from me. Lots of love, and I shall speak to you next time. Thank you very much again, Brandon, for giving up your morning. But at least we got a coffee in before then, eh?
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Take care.